Yeah. So, PD, I know you are pretty successful person. We talked about most of the companies you worked in and all that. I want to know about your failures. Can you tell me, which you can share with us and with the audience, some failure of your life and what did you learn from it?
I'll be honest with you, the only learnings, yes, I seem successful on the surface, but most of my successes have been shaped by the failures. And I'm thankful for those failures, right? So the things you can learn, either you can go to school and learn things, the old school way. But if you're operating in a highly dynamic, highly modern environment, like for example AI, well, it's not even clearly defined, how this field is going to shape up, right. What things are going to happen there. Like we talked about, even the basic things like DevOps is not even clear yet. And so because the field is shaping up, you need to have this experiential learning. And Satya talks about this. When, if you remember, he came on as the CEO of Microsoft. One of the things he said was, we will be a learn-it-all company, not know-it-all company. And that is a really good advice, because if you are learning from your failures and experiences quickly, Facebook had this mantra, fail fast and move on. Mm-hmm. It is controversial the way they do it, but there is something to be said about quick learning from your experiences. Right. So I can tell you, for all the successes that I had, I think I have at least one failure attached to every success. Even in UiPath, for some of the product lines where we thought things would go a certain way, they have not. But it's a minuscule number, right? You at my level, you're essentially doing portfolio management. Right, and just like you have fund managers who make sure that if you have non-performing part of your portfolio, that doesn't affect the overall portfolio. It works out that way. But when I was early on in my career, you are naive, and you're just like a naive trader. You would make these really big trades where it's like if you lose, you're going to lose everything. Yeah. But if you succeed, it's going to be a home run. We don't do that anymore as you go on becoming more senior in your roles, because you can't bet the whole company on one specific thing. But there have been series of failures that I've learned things from. Like there was a company that I was trying to launch before UiPath, between Microsoft and UiPath. Mm-hmm. It was a really interesting technology, and it was a fascinating technical problem. Like the technologist in me and the developer in me was like fascinated. I was like, yeah, this is a cool place to work in. It was an AI company. But when I looked at the business part of it, it didn't look like you could build a unicorn in that area, even in like 10 years, right? The revenue was not going to be to the point where you can build that technology out quickly. And so it was a quick learning where it was like, we were trying to raise money for that company, and we quickly realized that the growth expectation that we had would not come from that business. Right. And so we decided, not to invest heavily in that specific area. Similarly, in the past, there are a couple of things that I've learned. Bill Gross, who started Idea Lab, he talks about this stuff. He has about 100 different startups that he has funded that became successful. Somebody was asking him, what is the one factor that is that you would say determines the success of a company, primarily, or in most majority of the cases. And it wasn't the founders, it wasn't the technology, it wasn't how the company was structured. It was the timing, right? The timing has to be right. I learned the things the hard way. Like there was a startup I was working on before Microsoft. So there was a company that I was working for that eventually became a part of Microsoft. But before that, the startup before that was a startup which was doing kind of mix of Pinterest and Facebook combined. And we are talking about 2005. The idea was way before its time, right? You didn't even have the monetization mechanisms in place to be able to build a business around it.
Right.
So the timing was wrong in that case. So there's a bunch of these series of these failures, and so now yes, I mentor a bunch of PMs, and I have PM directors who report to me, but those failures are the ones which I quote in most of my meetings. It's not the successes that were there.
Right.
But most of the times, my job, I see it as warning them about the potholes that can be there in front of them.
Right.
Because they know how to drive, they have the cars, and they have all I need to do is warn them of the potholes.
True.
If they can work around them, they're good drivers.
True. No, I want this to our audience to take away this thing. They hear you talking, and you work in this big company, UiPath, and being in Microsoft and all. But it's not all about successes. And don't shy away from your failure. And I feel everybody should take away this thing that it's a part.
Make the failures as your as a learning moment.
Right.
It should be taken as a learning moment. You shouldn't be down or get depressed if you're failing. It should just be taken as a big learning moment.
Right. Because my main audience is the kid sitting in Mongolia and starting his journey, career, and interviewing and maybe failing and getting a job and all. And especially this time is pretty tough. So people are going through a tough time. It's a rough patch for everybody. And so I want to make sure people get that.
No, I mean, I can tell you, it's the failure is a common thread in almost every successful person.
Yeah.
Right now, so you saw Snowflake,
right.
The largest IPO in the history of software.
Yeah.
I'm hoping we can supersede them when UiPath goes IPO. But if you look at their CEO Slutman,
right.
who's
he's the third IPO, I believe.
It's his third IPO. He took ServiceNow public and another company before that. He has written a really good book called The Tape Sucks, and in that book he talks about his failures. I think I read somewhere he failed an interview 10 times to get into a specific company.
Wow.
10
times, and they still interviewed him 11 times.
Well, but I can tell you, I have similar experiences in some of the things.
Really?
It was pretty interesting.
You failed an interview, you're saying?
Yes, I failed a bunch of them.
Okay.
Early in my career, but yes.
Because
you can imagine, every one of them pretty much told me where I was wrong,
right.
And so I went in with a different strategy.
And they were right. Do you agree with them that they were right when you failed the interview and they told you why? Okay. Cool. Because I know you, PD, outside work and all, and find you to be pretty smart guy. We call you walking Wikipedia. So if you fail interview, that's a little surprising for me.
No.
Okay. Interesting.